You're listening to episode 17 of the Fed and Fearless podcast. Today, we're talking with Jennifer Fugo all about how to deal with chronic skin rashes. So stay tuned. Hi, I'm Laura Schoenfeld. I'm a registered dietitian and coach trained in functional medicine with a passion for helping women just like you ditch perfectionism and use food, fitness, and self-care to fuel your bigger God-given purpose. I believe that it's possible to achieve your biggest life-changing goals without the frustration, obsession, or negative self-talk that so many women subject themselves to every day. All you need are the right tools, the right mindset, and the faith to turn your dreams into reality. I'm here to guide you along the way. The truth is that you are so much more than a body, and I'm on a mission to help you change the way you think and act at a core beliefs level so you can transform your physical, mental, and spiritual health from the inside out. Are you ready to become fed and fearless in your pursuit of a healthy, meaningful life? Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm Laura Schoenfeld. I'm so excited for our episode today because we have a really special guest that has so much knowledge and wisdom to share. And I was just incredibly inspired by what we talked about and the approach that she's taking to helping people heal from skin rashes. So today we have my friend, Jennifer Fugo. She is a clinical nutritionist empowering women who have been failed by conventional medicine to beat chronic skin and unending gut challenges. Because she's overcome a long history of gut issues and eczema, Jennifer has empathy and insight to help her clients discover missing pieces and create doable integrative plans. Simply put, Jennifer believes that you deserve better. That's why she launched skinterrupt.com to interrupt the failed conversation about chronic skin problems with helpful alternatives that you aren't being told about. She has a master's degree in human nutrition from the University of Bridgeport and is a certified nutrition specialist. Her work has been featured on Dr. Oz, Reuters, Yahoo, CNN, and many podcasts and summits, including now this one. Jennifer is an Amazon bestselling author and the host of The Healthy Skin Show. She's a friend of mine. She's someone that I communicate with regularly about life and business and all the things that both her and I are trying to do in the world when it comes to changing the world and changing the conversation around health and nutrition and all that good stuff. So I am just so honored to have her here on the show. She's a wonderful person and a wealth of knowledge, and I'm excited that you guys get to meet her and hear from her as well. So without further ado, here is Jennifer Fugo. All right, welcome back, everybody. I am so excited to have here with me one of my friends and fellow health podcasters, Jen Fugo. Welcome, Jen.
Well, thank you for having me, Laura. It's a real honor to be here, especially on this amazing creation that you're putting together for everybody, because it's a great resource for all of the information that, I love following you. So this is, I'm fangirling for a moment. You know, we are friends, so I'm very appreciative.
Well, I'll fangirl right back at you because I always love seeing the business that you're building and just the message that you're spreading. And I'm always impressed by how you combine all of evidence-based stuff with the mindset stuff. Like, I feel like for me, I need to get back into that actual evidence-based content sharing on social media. So it's like, I've gotten so into the mindset stuff that I'm like, oh, maybe I should talk about nutrition once in a while. So I love the balance that you strike on your feed. So if you all don't know Jen, hopefully this episode will be a great introduction to her work, because if you are dealing with skin issues, then she's definitely the one you want to follow and get information from. Jen is a skin health expert primarily. I know you really focus heavily on things like skin rashes. I'm not sure if there's any other skin issues that you tend to deal with, but you're the go-to person when somebody's dealing with chronic rashes. And I would love to talk to you about how you got into the field of skin health, because I know that for a long time you were really more in just the general gluten-free world. You had the gluten-free school Is that the name of the website that you used to run?
It was, yes.
Yeah. So I know that was a big part of your business for a really long time. And then now you've transitioned to focusing and niching in on skin health. So I would love to hear your story about how you became a skin health expert and what was the path that led you to where you are today with the work that you're doing.
The simple answer to that question is that when I got to a certain point supporting people around elimination diets, which funny enough, we're going to talk about today, I'm sure. I realized that being a health coach at the time really wasn't enough to support people because I was getting a lot of clients that were quite sick. They were referrals from doctors and gastroenterologists. People had celiac disease and all sorts of really serious issues that they needed support in their diet. And I thought to myself, geez, there's only so much eating salads, and sometimes it's not appropriate to eat salads with certain gut issues. And there's only so much you can do with diet. And I really wanted to understand things more. So I decided to go back for a master's degree in human nutrition. And in the midst of that 3-year program, which was super intense, I developed dyshidrotic eczema. And for someone who's thinking that A, that's a weird name for eczema, and B, what the heck is that? It's basically a form of eczema that primarily affects the hands and the feet. Usually on the hands, it's more the palm side of the hands, and you develop these they look like clear, almost blisters, and that's a part of this flare rash cycle that will happen where you'll sort of develop these little clear bubbles under the skin. They eventually bubble up and burst, and then it becomes really red and itchy, and you have this horrible rash, and then eventually it'll go away, and it just keeps coming back, and it's this awful, vicious cycle. And it got to the point where it started on one finger and then spread to the palms of my hands and wrecked my nails, and it just got to a point where, you go to the gym. Can you imagine having rashes on your hands? How do you pick up a weight? How do you even want to touch anything in a gym when you have cracks in your skin, on your hands, right? Because we worry about staph infections. How do you turn a doorknob? How do you shake people's hands? And why would anyone want to shake your hand? Because your hand looks infected. So I got to this point where I felt very disconnected from other people because people started to look at me like I was diseased, and I couldn't figure out how to get it to stop. And I went to the dermatologist. I tried the steroid creams. Fortunately, my dad's a doctor, and he was like, hey, FYI, use the steroid creams as sparingly as possible, because you can't use them long term. I'm lucky in that I got that warning, whereas in my community of people who are struggling with rashes and have used steroid creams excessively and at just a lot of times poor education, they can end up with other serious issues like topical steroid withdrawal. But I started, after I don't know how many months, I just became frustrated. I'm like, it just keeps coming back. I can't get it to stop. And so I started diving into the alternative websites. And I tried a bunch of stuff and nothing worked. Nothing helped. And I thought to myself, how am I supposed to go through life like this? People don't want to touch me. I can't wash dishes. I can't handle, I'm really passionate about animals that don't have homes. I had a very difficult time working at that. I used to volunteer at an animal shelter and rescue, and just life became really debilitatingly hard, aside from the fact that I was in a lot of pain and itching and etc. And so I started to look at things from a different perspective when my husband said, you're going through this very expensive education. Why don't you look at things from a different perspective? Because clearly the people that have written about this online have only been kind of trying to manage it. And that was where the real light bulb went on for me, the light bulb experience, because initially I didn't know what I was doing. I made a guess. I had no testing, nothing to go off of. I didn't even know if anything I was going to work was going to work. And it eventually did. It took a lot of persistence, a lot of putting one foot in front of the other, having no idea if I was ever going to see clear skin again. And it took like a year to get there. And I realized at the end of it, when my skin finally healed up and it wasn't flaring again, I thought, I was free. I'm going to go about my life. I'm going to work with people with gut issues. And I happened to still be in Facebook groups with people who have eczema and psoriasis and whatnot. And the pictures that they would post and their posts would just break my heart. And I'm like, this is not fair. This is not fair that they have no idea that there could potentially be other options. And I, at the time, I wasn't as educated as I am now. And I'm sure there's many things that I don't know and I'm constantly learning. But I felt like it was my calling and my duty to not leave those people behind, to not say, well, I'm done. I'm done. Like, my getting to what felt like the finish line for me was the beginning of something. It was the beginning of a door opening. And that's where I came up with this idea of like, what if we change the conversation and we change the way that we look at skin issues and help people who are like some who are on the verge of suicide because of how bad their skin issues are. And I came up with the idea for Skin Interrupt, which is my website, and started the Healthy Skin Show. And I feel so blessed and lucky that I have the opportunity to give back and to support people who oftentimes feel like they literally have no other hope. And I'm not saying that I'm fixing them or giving them all the answers. It's not about that. It's about allowing people to find the information and connect with it, to become informed, so that, and empowering them to make their own decisions with research and knowing that sometimes maybe, and you've talked about this, how sometimes you should take the NyQuil if you're really sick. As the same goes for skin issues. Maybe sometimes a steroid cream might be appropriate. Maybe antibiotics might be appropriate. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. So giving people a really a non-fear-mongering way forward so that they can make the decision that's best for them. And so that's how I got started.
That's awesome. And I think it's so important to just have that mindset that whatever is going to work with the least amount of side effects is the right thing to do, right? Because I feel like maybe not so much, I guess it really depends on what community you're coming from. I don't really consider myself part of the quote unquote paleo community anymore. I guess technically I might be, but I feel like having been in that space for so many years, it's always seemed to me that the goal was always, what's the most natural way to do something? And it's kind of funny to realize that like natural doesn't always mean better. Sometimes it does. And obviously, if you have two options, one's natural and one's pharmaceutical, and they both work exactly the same, I would say a lot of people would rather use the natural option. But that doesn't mean that it always is better. And sometimes it's completely useless. Like I can only imagine the kind of stuff that you are finding from the super like alternative health websites. I imagine, coconut oil was involved and, that kind of thing. And it's one of these things where I love what you're doing with balancing the education about what's possibly a problem with some of these pharmaceutical interventions like the steroid cream. And also when are those interventions appropriate and how are they best used in order to get the results that people want to get? So I love that about the work that you do. It is so objective, and there's no bias towards, it has to be natural or it has to be like, something that comes from the earth or it has to be chemical free, because for a lot of people that stuff is not enough, or maybe it's not the right thing to do. And there's nothing wrong with using medication if it's the best choice. Like I just think I agree that there's a lot of people out there that are just like horrified about the idea of using medication for anything. And I understand it. Like I know there are some medications out there that are abused and inappropriate. And I mean, our mutual friend Jolene Brighton is on I hate the word crusade, but on like a mission about birth control as being something that's overly prescribed. So I get that the worry about prescription medication can be warranted, but then also, like you said, baby bathwater. Mm-hmm. We don't want to be missing out on an opportunity to heal a serious issue, just because medication on the whole can be misused in a lot of cases.
I think to your point, one of my big things is making sure that people don't feel shamed around their choices. Because there's way too much shaming going on, no matter what type of health condition you have, whether you have skin rash issues like eczema, psoriasis, tinea versicolor, lichen sclerosis, rosacea, seborrheic dermatitis, which is dandruff. There's so much shame in some of these Facebook groups when people say, well, I'm using this medication or I'm considering using this, and people will just like all come at them. How dare you? This is poison for your body. And I'm like, hold the phone. First of all, you do not walk in their shoes every single day. You have no right to judge their experience. And while maybe you have concern, this is probably not the best way to express that. It's not appropriate. And I understand where it's coming from, but let me give you an example very quickly. I have one client who had eczema almost all over his body, really badly. It was getting to the point where he was super depressed and was having a very difficult time functioning in life, okay? So you're constantly in pain, you're constantly itchy. It's like you're on the verge of tears almost all the time. And he went to a naturopath, they ran a regular stool test and came back with nothing. Everything looks fine. And he did some antimicrobials for a month, no improvement. And he's like, I don't know what else to do. I feel like, I'm cursed, basically. And I went through his history and I thought, you've been to Africa. You lived in Africa for 2 years. You've been to Haiti. You've been to Nepal. You've been to all these third world countries. I understand you don't have GI issues, but what if you have an infection underneath? And so we did do some additional testing and discovered he had multiple infections and parasites. And so in that situation, for someone who's severely suffering, do you go, maybe I'll give this a try for the next 8 months and see if these botanicals will work? Or maybe could you use some pharmaceutical agents to kind of kick the ball further down the court? And his doctor agreed that that was a smarter thing to do. It got him so much further along. And then you go in with some botanicals and things like that to kind of get you to the finish line. And so we have to think about the level of suffering that someone is going through and making sure that they're educated, but not scared to death, because that's not fair. Everyone has the right to become educated and we shouldn't shame anyone. So I think of it as that, like, what level of suffering are you at? How bad are things? And what's your quality of life? And that should help you decide what is best for you.
Yeah. And I'm sure that, I've been in a couple of different health related Facebook groups, and depending on the group, they can be either super positive environments. I always love your group and the way that you show up in your group. And then there's some groups that, like you said, it's like somebody says something that is, I don't even want to say wrong. It's like somebody just says something that other people disagree with, and it turns into this whole just, battle in the Facebook comments. And I think that with chronic illness in general, let alone something like a skin issue that is causing that constant discomfort and even social shame that's happening, it's like the last thing you need is to go online and start trying to get answers and then getting attacked by strangers on the internet about your choices. So I think just creating an environment where people can explore options without fear of being like chastised or fear of sounding stupid or somebody saying that they're wrong. Because at the end of the day, like you said, the person that is doing the attacking doesn't know what the other person is dealing with. They don't know what they've been through. They don't even know necessarily that that's not the right thing for that person to do from a scientific perspective. So I do think that if somebody out there is dealing with any health issue, let alone skin issues, to find a group or a community that actually supports exploration and isn't like, this is the right way, this is the wrong way, how dare you think about doing XYZ, or coming in with excessively restrictive and not super helpful guidelines. And actually, I feel like that's a good transition. Segue. Yeah, because something that I love about the work that you do, and I think aligns really well with the work that I do, is this idea that elimination diets are so overused. So, and I see this all the time. I don't work with a ton of skin issues because it's just not something I see as often. You're exclusively seeing it, I think. So it's one of these things where you'll probably have a lot more experience with this than me. But a lot of times the people that I work with that have skin issues, their first step beyond medication is food sensitivity testing and food eliminations, that kind of thing. So obviously, it's a common belief that skin symptoms, especially these rash type conditions, are caused by food sensitivities. And then the solution to food sensitivities, which this is a whole nother ball of wax, the solution to a food sensitivity is to remove any and all foods that could even potentially be triggering those symptoms. So the belief is that a strict elimination diet is the answer to resolving chronic skin issues. I would love to hear your perspective on that.
You like, oh my gosh, this is my favorite topic. And it's my favorite right now because it is so common. As soon as you go, I have this skin issue, and you post a picture of your hand or your elbow or wherever it is, the first thing that almost every person will say is, did you take out gluten? Did you take out dairy? Did you take out eggs? And like, there's this laundry list by the time you're done reading all of the comments of basically everything that you could eat. And now the person is left with like, what is my diet even going to look like? And a lot of these people that are recommending this don't understand that elimination diets, while they do have a place and they can be helpful to a degree, food sensitivities are not a root cause. Your gut did not become leaky because of food sensitivities. While gluten is one of the only clinically researched proteins that shows an increased leakiness or permeability to the GI tract, at this point, I don't actually believe, unless you have celiac disease, that gluten is really going to wreck your gut and cause you to have a gazillion food sensitivities. I have typically found that there are a bunch of other reasons, and it's usually a perfect storm of events. And it's not the food, it's oftentimes gut dysbiosis, so an imbalance of the bugs within the gut community. There's issues with how we're digesting and absorbing food. So food isn't being absorbed appropriately and just ends up further down in the GI tract, feeding bugs. All sorts of issues that are more of a concern than anything else. And so by telling someone, take out all these foods, well, then what happens? You're reducing nutrient, you're reducing food variety, and nutrient density, which is critical. And we also then become incredibly neurotic about food in a way that is so unhelpful. And food fear is a really serious issue. And I'm going to say in the skin rash arena for sure, but you and I both know that food fear is real with pretty much every health concern at this point. People are so afraid to eat almost anything because every diet book that comes out and every health book that now comes out tells you you have to avoid lectins, you have to avoid this, you have to avoid that. And it's no wonder people are like, I don't even know how to eat anymore because I read that this was bad for me and then this person says it's okay, and they just don't know. And so I want to be very clear here. There are, at least from my research and all the interviews that I've done, currently I've identified 16 root causes of skin rash issues. I'll run through the list quickly to make a point. Okay? Only 16. And that doesn't mean that you have all 16. It means you have to find your unique combo. So for sure, microbiome dysbiosis, you can have that both of the skin and the gut. The gut, I consider almost like the headquarters of the microbiome. It sort of like sets the tone. And there is some really interesting ways that it communicates with the skin microbiome. But there's that. There's gut dysfunction, which I mentioned. You can definitely have food reactions. That's real. There's a lot of people who have legit allergies, for example, and sensitivities are a real thing, but they're not the main. They shouldn't be the main focus. Nutritional deficiencies, liver detoxification challenges. That doesn't mean you need to do a liver detox. We're looking actually at the biochemical pathways that are in the liver that do the jobs that help your body thrive. Trauma, unmanaged stress, there's some genetic implications as well, thyroid dysfunction, hormone imbalances, autoimmunity and autoinflammation, drug reactions, mitochondrial dysfunction, heavy metals, environmental toxins, and allergies to things in our environment like pollen, dander, and chemicals. But you can see that out of that entire list, only one thing is food. That's it. And so if you think that you're going to take one facet of this and you're going to just do that one thing, and then you're frustrated with wondering why on earth you're not getting better like Susie promised that you would in a Facebook group, this is why. Because you can't do one thing. You can't make one little change and assume that because you have these problems and you read somewhere online that, oh, if I have skin issues, it's tied to leaky gut. I take out these foods and my gut's going to heal. That's not realistic. And I want people to understand that there is real damage in overusing restrictive diets. I've had people in my community who've ended up hospitalized because of how much food they've taken out. So I beg of you to please, if you're listening to this and you feel so desperate and so frustrated and your diet has become incredibly limited, think about the idea of starting to bring foods back in, because it's not a tenable way to live, and it adds more stress, more trauma. It reduces nutrients. I mean, it has a major negative psychological and physiologic effect on the body.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I could just mic drop it right there for you. I feel like the food sensitivity thing, it's funny because you called it like one little thing. And the crazy thing is that it's probably one of the hardest things to do long term as like a actual approach when it comes to healing from health issues. And I agree with you that I actually think that food elimination is rarely going to solve the problem for somebody. Now, like you said, maybe there's somebody out there that really does have like a gluten sensitivity and they're eating gluten all the time and they pull it out and, oh, look at that, my skin rashes go away. But I feel like so many people out there, they go on these really restrictive diets that pull out. I mean, it's kind of shocking sometimes the things that I see in certain groups that I'm running for different health conditions. Like I have a program called Get Your Period Back. And one of my participants in there recently was saying her Chinese medicine doctor, or her, I guess, acupuncturist, I don't know if it's the same thing, but he was suggesting that she follow this like Korean like food thing that took out meat and starches and grains and like dairy, eggs. And I was like, what are you going to eat? And she's like, I know it's been really hard because I don't have anything left. I'm like, well, because literally that's like every single food group. So I just see this happening in so many different worlds, let alone the skin issue community. And I think for a lot of people in the short term, yeah, maybe it removes some of your symptoms because you're not exacerbating your immune system or you're not disrupting your gut flora. But in the long term, I feel like it actually causes more problems down the road because it does disrupt your gut flora if you're avoiding carbs or avoiding meat or whatever you're trying to avoid. And then it also creates nutritional deficiencies, which can then lead to a less robust gut. So like you get gut permeability from just being malnourished. So I feel like, and that's not only micronutrients, so you can't just pop a multivitamin to fix that. That's also just calories total, because our gut uses energy. And if we are under eating in total calories, we're going to develop gut issues. That's just the way things work. So I feel like this elimination diet approach in my mind, and I feel like you would agree with me on this, it's a short term, let's just get you feeling better in the very short term. If that helps to avoid these foods, okay, fine. Let's pull them out for a couple weeks and then also figure out what's actually causing this problem, because the goal is not to be on an elimination diet for the rest of your life.
Right. And the other thing I would add to this is for anyone listening to this going, but I know I have food sensitivity testing done, and I know that this food bothers me. Look, I can't eat chicken eggs. You know what happens when I eat chicken eggs? I get diarrhea. Like, that's just how it goes. And I've accepted that. Like, it is what it is. But I've made some strides. I can eat like one chicken egg and like a whole gluten-free cake or something like that. Me and gluten, we're not exactly friends. But I strived after a certain point of being very restrictive with my diet for a long time. I realized that it really wasn't helpful. And as I learned more and more, I thought to myself, what if it's not necessarily the food? Because we just think, oh my gosh, well, I eat this and I seem to react, and I eat that and I seem to react. What if it's not the food? What if it's what happens to the food when it gets down into your digestive system? And so you're misinterpreting the enemy here as the food and not realizing that you have to look at gut function, meaning how do you break down, digest, absorb the food, and what happens to it when that food intermixes with the microbiome. And sometimes with skin issues, some people say, well, I have issues with salicylates. I have a salicylate intolerance. I'm like, that's a liver problem. That has to do with your liver detoxification system. That's not a food sensitivity. That implies that your liver needs additional nutritional support for phase 2 detoxification. And so sometimes it can be helpful to say, okay, I react to certain foods, but then the question is why? Rather than assuming that you've like hit the wall and this is just what I have to do. So I want to use that as an invitation for people to really question, is it the food or is it what happens to the food when it gets in your body? We need to dig deeper into that and understand what's going on.
Yeah, I want to echo the idea that we're not saying that you should never avoid any food, because I feel like that's where we get into a lot of this like anti-diet community talking about like restrictive diets as being completely useless or food eliminations being like something nobody should ever do. And we're not saying that either. I mean, chicken eggs, great example. We're not going to say to Jen, oh, you should be eating all foods and you should be eating eggs. Even it doesn't matter if you're having diarrhea from them. And maybe one day you'll figure out why and you'll fix the problem and you'll be able to go back to eating chicken eggs. But I feel like the goal is let me make my diet as least restrictive as possible. And if there's a couple of things that are still there that are like, every time I eat this, I feel like garbage and I haven't found out what the root cause is, it's okay to have some things that you don't eat. We're not saying that you have to have like any food that exists in the world is something that you have to eat, because we just want your diet to be as diverse and free as possible.
Yeah. And I will add to this too, that it is your skin is so nutrient hungry, and so many other systems have to be filled up with nutrients in order for your skin to rebuild correctly. That's one of the key pieces that people miss. So a lot of times we're just like, oh, what cream, what salve, what this can I slather on myself to stop the itchiness, to get things to be not as dry and cracked or burning and red and itchy and whatnot. And it is really a two-pronged approach. You have to think about what's happening in the internal system as well as in the external world. It's not like gut issues where we can just say, oh, focus on the food, which seems to be the primary focus for most people, even though I think, and I think you think as well, it's short-sighted. But with skin, you can't just assume that a cream's going to fix it, because I'll give you an example from like eczema. So real quick with eczema. Eczema has one facet to it where this protein called filaggrin, I mean, this is sort of general in understanding skin, the skin barrier, and the concept of leaky skin. To make your skin barrier nice and tightly sealed to keep the moisture in, and etc., you want a protein called filaggrin to be produced correctly. So there's a gene called filaggrin and it produces a protein called filaggrin. And I think of that as like mortar mix in a brick wall, right? Same goes for the gut. We need the gut lining to be sealed nice and tight, right? Until it becomes leaky, and then we have leaky gut. So it's sort of similar in that respect, except with the skin we see this change in pH. The pH of the skin should be somewhere around 4.5. We see a change in the bacterial and microbe community, and we start to see this inflammation. And so I mentioned filaggrin for a very specific reason, because you can have a SNP in filaggrin. And by the way, for those who are going to email me, it's not important that you go looking to see if you have a SNP in your filaggrin gene, just so you know.
And a SNP is a single nucleotide polymorphism.
Yes.
Which is just like a single, I don't want to say error, but it's like a different piece of DNA.
Like a variation. Yeah. And a lot of people go, oh, I need to know if I have it. You don't. I've asked the dermatologists that are experts in this. You don't. The critical thing that you need to know is what causes filaggrin, the gene, to produce faulty copies of filaggrin is inflammation. So then you have to say, well, where's the inflammation coming from? Oh, it must be coming from my dog's dander. It must be coming from the chemicals. But what happens if the inflammation is being driven by something inside you? What if you have a gut infection, like my client that I mentioned? What if you have, there's any number of things. You have thyroid dysfunction. You have a whole slew of things that are driving inflammation and triggering cytokine activity, etc. You might not be able to check in with yourself on that and be like, oh, my body just told me that I have a Klebsiella infection. You might not be able to know that, right? That's why we need to look deeper and say, well, where's the other inflammation coming from? Because we can't assume that just using a topical steroid, like that was my experience. I just kept using topical steroids to stop the inflammation, not realizing that I had a whole bunch of other issues underneath the surface. And when I used them together, I was dealing with the inflammation on the outside and the inside. Slowly that fire quelled, and I was able to have finally healthy, intact skin. And so I would say that there are certainly things that you can use on the exterior of your skin that I found to be helpful personally, and some things that I've interviewed many experts about. But I would encourage you to make sure that you are looking internal, that you're not just fixated on what you can put on your skin, and that you look at all of these other root cause possibilities So that way you don't feel like you're out of options. And number two, you're really helping your health in general, because when your skin's messed up, there's usually 3 to 5 different root cause issues going on under the surface. It just so happens to show up in your skin. You can have infections and have no GI issues. You can have other issues and have no idea they even exist. I've had clients where their thyroid numbers are so off and no doctor ever thought to ask to have those levels run. And when they came back, like I had a client recently, her TSH was at 32.
Oh my God.
She had no idea. And I'm not saying I found it. I just said, hey, I think we should check here. And lo and behold, she had all these other problems underlying it. And as a result of identifying those and starting to get support between myself and her doctor, she's really starting to feel a lot better. I mean, it's not 100% with the skin. The skin takes a long time. I do think that's an important point to make with people. There is no quick fix. Quick fixes are like steroid creams, Dupixent, Humira, a lot of these like biologic drugs. Those are quick fixes. They're the super highway because they're shutting something off. If you decide to go the more natural route, it's going to take time. It took me 6 months to stop flares from coming up, and that assumed that I got everything right. So I just want to encourage people to not get discouraged after 2 weeks or after a month. Skin takes time because you got to address the other issues under the surface.
So you gave us a list of 16 and possibly growing root cause challenges that can create these chronic skin issues. Obviously, we won't be able to go over all of them. If people want to learn more about the diversity of these, then obviously they need to get in your community. What's the name of your online Facebook group?
I believe it's just Jen's Inner Circle. But if you sign up if you join my newsletter, and I can always give you the link too to put in the show notes to that group. But anybody that signs up for my newsletter can also join as well.
Awesome.
It's a free community.
Yeah, so we'll put both of those links in the show notes. So that's, if you want all of the 16 to talk about those, then that's where you want to be. But for the purposes of today's podcast, I would love to hear if there's any kind of like first level, like what would you look at first if somebody comes to you with a chronic skin rash?
Yeah, the first thing I would say is you, number one, need to take a look at how often you're going to the bathroom. Are you able to sweat? Because that's important. So our elimination pathways. We definitely want to make sure to write as digestive function as much as possible. I love to have people check for low stomach acid because a lot of people, especially when they're under a chronic state of stress, stomach acid can be reduced and that can cause a whole slew of issues. And so I like to do my best to support that. And then you and I've talked about this before in my community, but I really do find it to be important to make sure that you're getting enough protein, because a lot of women especially seem to think that we don't need that much protein because they watch all these documentaries and they think it's not important. But if you've got skin issues, I've found that for somebody who's pretty sedentary, so you're not going and working out 5 days a week at the gym and lifting weights and training for a triathlon or something like that, that around 70 to 80 grams of protein seems to be a good general rule of thumb to shoot for every single day. And if you're unsure of where you're at, you could use MyFitnessPal or something like that to understand better how much protein you're taking in, because protein is more than just your muscles. You need it to rebuild tissue, for enzymes, neurotransmitters. It's really an important macronutrient. And for a lot of women, we've been just told that we don't need protein. And we really, really do if we've got health issues, at least from what I found.
Well, and I'll throw in a little asterisk there on the protein concern, because I agree that I feel like there's this weird split between people either think you hardly need any protein or they think you need to be eating like a 10-ounce steak at every meal. And obviously 70 or 80 grams per day as a goal if you're not super active. So that's what, you could probably get away with 8 ounces of some kind of animal protein for the whole day and then get some other plant proteins from things like starches or vegetables, that kind of thing. So it's not like a massive chunk of meat at every single meal. However, the asterisk I wanted to throw in there is the idea that that amount of protein is only appropriate if somebody's also eating enough carbs and calories.
Yeah.
Because protein, if you're not eating enough, it's going to be used for energy and it's not going to be available for physical structure and neurotransmitter production and that kind of thing. So protein's this funny nutrient that I think our bodies would prefer to use it for creating things like DNA and hormones and all the things that are created from protein. But if we're in a chronically underfed state, either, like I said, total calories or even carbs, your body's going to start using that protein either for energy to burn as fuel, or it's going to use it to create new glucose when you're not getting enough carbs to meet your glucose needs. So I just wanted to throw that in there because protein, I think I love protein. I eat like as much of it as I can as far as like my meals go, but it's also something that I think people can overemphasize if they're like, well, I'm just going to eat protein and vegetables. I'm going to eat like a strict paleo diet. And then they're under eating on carbs and calories. And the protein they're eating is not even getting used to create the physiological molecules.
Yeah. And the other point too is obviously if you have any level of like kidney disease, just check in with your doctor about what the right amount of protein is to consume, because there can be, at least, I don't work with people who have kidney disease, but you have to be more conscious of protein intake at lower quantities, actually, when you have kidney problems. So just be aware of that. And it's always good. Check in with your doctor. Like if you're going to make diet changes, it's okay to be like, hey, is this all right? You know, like everybody's different. We don't all have the same issues and health concerns. So if you've got certain conditions or you're on certain medication, always you feel free to check in with your doctor.
So you said protein intake, and what was the other one that you mentioned?
Is making sure to address any overt or like easy to find digestive function issues. So are we pooping regularly 1 to 3 times a day? I'd say is like kind of a good spot to be at. And you're not straining, right? You're not having loose stools. If you're not pooping regularly, then that's something you want to address. And then I would say the next thing would be, making sure you have enough stomach acid, and then protein intake. That's usually the first place that I start with pretty much everybody. And every single client, for the most part, needs that help. And in fact, most of the time I'm like, okay, let's add some of these foods back in. I mean, most people that I work with that come in the door are on such an incredible elimination diet, have not seen any improvement whatsoever. And they just don't know where to even begin adding things back in. And it's a big deal to me because it's oftentimes not the food that's triggering the issue. It's underlying things. So you got to get to the root cause of that. And I'll also add too, you mentioned coconut oil earlier. If someone's using coconut oil on their skin, I ask them to stop. It's not that it's like a hard pass for everybody, but the problem with coconut oil is that it's so highly antimicrobial. And you have to keep in mind that one issue with chronic skin issues is that there is dysbiosis of the microbiome on the skin. And so if you're getting rid of a large swath of fungal organisms and bacterial organisms, etc., because you're applying coconut oil all the time, that can cause major problems. And so, I had some really interesting conversations with Karan Krishnan and Rachel Pontillo about this. And there's some better options out there like avocado oil, olive oil, even sunflower oil. I know when we eat it, we're all worried about the omega-6s, but there's some great research on it for skin health. Jojoba is also great. It's the closest to human sebum that's out there. And like almond oil, sesame oil, emu oil, those are all better options than coconut oil. If you have rashes, I'd say a hard pass on coconut. That's just my personal opinion. And I have an article that goes through the reasons why. Like it's also way too alkaline of an oil. So it actually disrupts the pH balance of your skin in a negative way. And it's not well absorbed because it's too saturated. So the molecules are too large and they can't be absorbed through the skin. But if you want to dive deeper into that and see the numerous comments on the most popular article that's on my site of people actually saying, oh my gosh, I thought I was alone. This made my skin so much worse. You can go check that out over at Skinterrupt. And I'm sure we could put the link in the show notes.
Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to think of like, how did the coconut oil thing on skin become so trendy? I got to imagine I'm trying to think who would actually benefit from it with all of those potential problems.
I have no idea. And it's very confusing to me because I thought that too. I was totally flabbergasted when I think it was Karan in the middle of an interview was just like, oh, no, don't use coconut oil. And I was like, what? What do you mean don't use coconut oil? It's all over the internet. And he's like, no, that is really not the best thing for your skin. And then if you go, so some things that you can try, like if you have rashes, you could apply some of these like healthful, nourishing oils to the outside. And then you could take a probiotic and sprinkle it on the oils. It'll kind of stick and let it sit there. And that can be some people found that to be helpful. I know that some clients like to use Megaspore for that reason. And he's like, oh, no, that's going to kill the bacteria. So I was like, okay, I have a lot to learn. And the more that I've dug into it and the more I've talked to different people that, deal with skin and skincare products, I was just like, all right, so coconut oil is not the best for everything. And I think we have to start asking harder questions of where the information that we're getting is coming from. And yeah, I mean, I've started questioning everything because I feel like at least in the skin world and having skin rashes, there's, we feel like we know it all, but we really don't. There's so much incredible research being done on the skin microbiome and the connection between the gut and the skin and all these different organ systems. So I think in the next probably 2 to 5 years, the way that we think about our skin will be much different. But for right now, there's a lot more out there than just steroid creams.
So one thing you've mentioned a couple times, just in the last couple minutes, is this idea of being a questioner. And we're not saying like aggressively question every single thing that anyone ever says. Like obviously somebody could come on this podcast and be like, you're wrong. But I'm curious if you have any advice for people who might be feeling a little, I don't know if the word's lost, but like even just talking about this coconut oil thing and hearing this, there's probably some minds being blown. Like, what? I thought coconut oil was good. Like, so how are they supposed to know who to trust, what information to trust, or if none of it's trustworthy, like how do they know what the good information is if it's not, whatever's plastered all over the internet?
Well, here's the thing. And Laura, I'm sure you can concur with this because you've written many a wonderful research-based articles, is that most people who write all these blogs out there, they know that you don't understand research. So they just pick studies. And a lot of times the studies are like on rats or monkeys or in mice, something else, which we're not animals. And so you want to look at the research. You want to understand where they're getting these references at. If you see no references and people are making claims, you need to question the validity of it, not in a nasty way. I mean, I always encourage my community members and my clients to be skeptical. I'm like, even question what I say. We all should be asking questions of why and can I, understand, how can I understand this deeper? Because the truth is, we're all learning and we keep an open mind and we are able to think for ourselves. And I think too, when we're open to realizing that maybe what we know today might not be correct tomorrow. We know a lot of information in the grand scheme of things, but I think what we do know is almost like a drop in a very large pond. And to claim that we know everything at this point in time, to me, is foolish. And I don't need a MD or a PhD to tell you that. I mean, my dad's a doctor and has an MD and a PhD, and he'll be the first to tell you that. He's invented devices and all sorts of things and does surgery, etc. We don't know everything. And so you want to look at the references. You want to look at, where that person got their training, and look for really good studies, good quality studies, which that's a whole other conversation. But I would say if someone is using test tube studies, or they're using animal studies to prove their point, those are two really big red flags, because you can't prove that just because you added vitamin C to some cells in a petri dish, that when you take vitamin C, the same effect will happen somewhere in the body. You've no idea that the vitamin C is even going to get there. And we're not rats, we're not mice. So those would be my quick tips about that. And it does stink that we can't have any definitives at times, but you have to some degree, trust your body and realize that symptoms are feedback. It's your body's way of communicating with you. It might not be the most articulate way that we would all like. I'm sure we would all prefer like a computer printout that says, here's what's wrong, but we don't get that. We get symptoms, and we have to learn how to listen to those symptoms. And we have to learn to say, okay, when I did this, this is what happened. But when I did this, it actually improved. Those things are important. Our history is important. And so I think when we broaden the scope out from just like, I have a rash, or, I have diarrhea or something like that, when we start to look at the body as a whole, we can see a lot more information to translate, because the body's just trying to communicate. It's just trying to ask for help in the best way it knows how.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, I feel like there's so many questions I want to ask, but I also want to make sure I get to the ones that I had planned. So we'll have to have you on the show again because you're such a wealth of knowledge. As far as mindset goes, because like I said, I am on a big old mindset kick lately. And I think it's really important to look at not only the physical elements and things like gut infections, micronutrient deficiencies, that kind of thing, but also looking at the way that the brain and the body communicate and how our thoughts are affecting the way our brain is communicating. So what would you say to somebody who believes that their body is broken, that their body has betrayed them, and or that their skin will never heal?
I would ask them how strongly they believe that, because what you believe will have a profound effect over your ability to stay the course and see things through. If you believe that there is no help for you, then why would you ever see a protocol through or a goal through to the end if you don't really believe that it can help you or you could even accomplish it? So we have to question, I just talked about questioning articles and the research, but we also have to question our own thoughts. And I think at one point in my darkest moment, I really thought everything was hopeless. And it was because I didn't realize that there were so many things out there that, to some degree, my doctors didn't know. It wasn't that they withheld it intentionally from me. They weren't trying to punish me. I don't think any doctor wants to see their patients suffer. They just didn't know. Conventional medicine, they have to practice in the standard of care. And the standard of care might not include things like jojoba oil or coconut oil and all these other things that we've discussed. So start to ask yourself why you're doing this. Do you believe that your life has some purpose, and understand your why? And even if you just spend some time having gratitude for what you do have in your life, and finding a community to support you through the process is important. But it's okay to be upset. It's okay to feel the anger, and it's important, depending on where you are, to seek help. Especially if you're feeling to a point where there's a tremendous amount of hopelessness. There's a huge risk, unfortunately, of suicide in people who have skin conditions chronically. And I would say get help. Ask for help. You want to make sure you're asking for the right help too. Someone who's qualified to really deal with the level of trauma that you've experienced, because skin issues are traumatic. And, there is hope on the other side. I certainly don't want to make any promises or guarantees because our bodies are all different. But I don't think your body betrayed you. I think it's just been trying to talk to you, and we're kind of conditioned at this point to think that symptoms that we experience are inconveniences, rather than this deeper calling from somewhere inside letting you know that something's wrong. So it's just an opportunity to tune in, pay attention, and do the work.
Yeah, I feel like the belief that your body's working against you is very common in the chronic illness world. And I really do believe that our bodies want to be healthy. Like, that's the way that they're designed, is to move towards improved health. Now, obviously, as we age, our ability to move towards health starts to degrade. But overall, the body is not like, oh, I'm going to just have this rash out of spite just because, like your body is on your team. Like, your body wants to be healthy, everything in your body is designed to move towards normal functioning. And yeah, there's things that get in the way of that. And there's things that are, it's like almost like if you were building a house and somebody like didn't bring the mortar for the bricks that you're putting together, you wouldn't say the person building the house had like sabotaged you. You would say, hey, we don't have mortar, so there's a reason these bricks aren't holding up. So it's one of these things where I do believe our thoughts affect our reality, and beliefs are not true. They're always just beliefs, right? Like they're not necessarily accurate. And so questioning beliefs and, just exploring like, how is that belief serving you? Or, do you have evidence that this is 100% true, that there is no solution? Like, is there a possibility that there is a solution that you just haven't found yet? Like just having those questions with yourself, like you said, or with a therapist or somebody who can help work through some of that stuff. Because if you believe that your body's broken, either you're not going to do the work that's going to help fix the problem that your body's experiencing, or you're going to actually create stress and neurotransmitters and hormones and stuff that are responding to those beliefs that then are stimulating the problem in the first place. So I just feel like thoughts and beliefs and mindset it's not just like woo woo, oh, like let's all be happy all the time, that kind of thing. It's more about just questioning, what is the belief that I have and how is this belief serving me? And can I say with 100% confidence that this belief is true? So I love that. I love that you're talking about that kind of stuff because like you said, the whole world of skin issues, skin rashes is extremely stressful, and being able to have that, I don't want to say control, because it's not really control, but have that, I don't know, just ability to navigate the mindset piece along with the physical piece, I think is really important for people getting the results they want to get. So I think you already kind of touched on this a little bit, but I would just love to hear from you one more time because one of the big things I'm all jazzed up about in the work that I'm doing these days is the idea that women are here to pursue a purpose that they were created for. And I can tell that this skin mission that you have is something that's definitely a big part of your purpose. So what is the vision for the work that you're doing with this, the Skin Interrupt and the Healthy Skin Show? And what's the impact that you hope to have on the world through the work you're doing?
That is a good question. No one's ever asked me that on a podcast before. I would say that, my big vision is ultimately to make and leave the world a better place than how I found it. I mean, I know that's a cheesy thing to say, but it's what I've always believed. It's why I have done every single thing that I've done in my life. It was just what arose in me. And, whether it's for skin or gut or just anything, that's what I believe. But at the end of the day, when it comes to the skin stuff, I don't want people to feel like they're out of options. And I feel like at this point, especially now that it's 2020 and we're looking around and saying, hey, is this really the best that we can do? And I would love to say, no, it's not. I think we can do better. I think our skin and our health deserve better, and we deserve to be more educated. And I think the only way that we're going to see a shift and change in how our practitioners and doctors and everyone understand our skin in the full context of the body, it has to be changed. And so I want to be the person to ask the questions. I love the fact that I'm asking people who have never talked to one another questions that, they're serving their patient base, but now their information is getting out there and it's starting to inspire a whole new generation of practitioners and doctors and nutritionists and people even themselves dealing with their skin rashes on a daily basis. They're like, oh my gosh, all these light bulbs are going off. They're starting to see that as well. And so to know that we have the capacity to help open each other's eyes, that can give us hope in realizing that there's so many things that we haven't even looked at yet. I don't know, I just want to see the whole system change. Like if I had gone to the dermatologist and they didn't care that I had been gluten, dairy, and egg free for, I don't even know how many years at that point I'd been, they didn't care. They didn't care that I had taken out all of the, dish soaps and laundry detergent, like, oh, good, you did the basic steps. It didn't work. Oh, here's a steroid cream. It would have been nice if someone had asked me a bunch of other information about my health, had looked at me as a total person. And that's my goal, is to help push that conversation. It's not about whether we choose medication or not. I think they all have an equal place at the table, and some may be right for some and might not be right for others, and that's okay. But we can do better. And I want to be a part of that process to help advocate for others and to ask those questions and have those conversations that nobody else is having. So that's my hope, so that we will not continue suffering like this, because there are answers out there. And I don't want to see any more pictures anymore of babies who are in tears with rashes all over them, and people who think that they need to kill themselves because they can't bear another day in pain. We should be doing better. We can do better. And I think we deserve a better quality of life so that we can be more present to your kids and to your parents and to your friends and your family and the finer things of life, to enjoy it to the fullest, not to be suffering every single day.
I love it. I feel like I got goosebumps just hearing how passionate you are. And I know that you are definitely changing the world when it comes to this issue. And I'm so excited to see what you're able to accomplish over the next however many decades that you're going to be doing this work, since I know that it's only been a couple years that you've been on this particular path, and you've done so much already. So it's going to be really awesome to watch you. Now I have one more question for you. And this one is one that I'm asking all of my guests. So what do you believe makes a person more than a body?
Oh man, that's a good question. What makes a person more than a body? Oh gosh, our life experience, love, emotions, the highs and lows of life, the struggles that we go through. To me, I always believe that there's a solution to everything, and so I view everything as a puzzle that if it's a puzzle, it has to have a solution. Everything is solvable, and I don't know. My body is a facet of my life. It's not everything. And while yes, it can move me through my day, I mean, it isn't the end all be all, there are precious moments in my day that have nothing to do with how I look or how much I weigh. And those are the things that are so much more valuable. Not to say that my health in general isn't valuable, but we are more than just a body. We have experiences and emotions and impact as well.
Awesome. I love it. Well, Jen, I could talk to you for hours, and like I said, I'll have to have you back on the show because there's a bunch of questions that I didn't get to ask because we got into so much awesome detail on the ones that I did get to ask. So all of that said, I know we're going to have a lot of people listening that want more from you and want to hear more about your approach and what you're discovering. So where can people find you if they want to follow along with the skin health journey that you're taking people through?
Yeah, you can visit me over at skinterrupt.com. And I know it's a little tricky to spell, so I'm sure Laura will put that in the show notes for you. Otherwise, you can also easily look up Healthy Skin Show. That's the podcast. And at this point, there's over 100 episodes. So lots of different content to consume depending on what skin condition you have. And I'm also over on Instagram at Jennifer Fugo is my handle. And that's a great place to connect with me.
Awesome. Yes, I love following Jen on Instagram. Like I said earlier in the show, she's got a lot of really cool mix of things between science and evidence and, practical tips, and then also the mindset and self-image piece. So I love it. And I know you guys will too. Anyway, thank you so much, Jen. It was such an honor to have you on the show and a pleasure to check in with you and just hear all the big stuff that you're doing in the world. So I'm rooting for you, and I know that you're making a big impact. So I can't wait to see what else you are able to accomplish.
Oh, thanks, Laura. You too. And I will be super excited for the next time we get to sit down and do this.
Yay, especially if we get to see each other in real life again, since it's been 2.5, 3 years at this point. I don't even remember. So, yeah. All right. Well, I hope you all have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next time on the Fed and Fearless podcast. Take care, everyone. Hey, everybody. Laura Schoenfeld here again. I'm so excited to announce that I now have openings for new private clients to begin working together in 2020. I have worked with hundreds of clients over more than 6 years on a variety of health conditions. My areas of expertise include hormone health and fertility, adrenal dysfunction, gut health, and immune dysregulation. I'm also well versed in sports nutrition and enjoy helping recreational and semi-professional athletes maximize their physical performance. My functional medicine training and client experience, combined with my compassion and realistic view of health, makes me a well-prepared partner for you in your journey towards better physical, mental, and spiritual health. If you're looking to build a relationship with a qualified health consultant who takes the time to get to know you as a unique person, then you'll love working with me as your own personal functional nutritionist. The first step to becoming a client of mine is to book a functional nutrition strategy session. On this 30-minute strategy call, I will provide a review of your current diet and lifestyle approach, clarity on what's holding you back from making progress towards your goals, and I'll help you come up with a personalized game plan for optimizing your health. If at the end of this call we decide it would be a good fit to work together on this plan, we'll have the opportunity to discuss my consultation packages and services, and even to get started working together for a longer-term partnership so that way you can experience lasting results. To book your session, go to lauraschoenfeldrd.com and click the menu button that says Work With Me. You can learn more about how I work with clients and book your strategy session from there. I look forward to meeting with you soon.